biggest earthquake ever to hit the lower 48 states was not the 6.7 Northridge quake in 1994, or the 6.9 Loma Prieta quake in 1989, or even the 7.8 San Francisco quake of 1906. But the series of 3 quakes which struck near St. Louis in 1811 and 1812. The earth didn't just shake, it discharged bizarre sand geysers, spewed strange vapors, made the Mississippi River run backwards, and sucked lakes dry.
All of a sudden, the hand of God comes down and strikes right where you're at.
For many, it seemed to be the end of the world.
These people were scared to death.
But it wasn't over. Thousands of aftershocks rattled the continent for 5 more months.
They rang church bells in Boston. They rattled China in New York. They were felt in Detroit. They were felt in Washington, D.C.
What if that same earthquake were to strike the Midwest today? The lives of at least 11 million Americans would be in peril.
The problem today is that what was an unpopulated part of America is now very populated.
It's happened before. It will happen again.
Many in Assumption Parish say they're concerned about a problem they say they've never seen before. Bubbles like this in Bayou Corn.
Take a ride down Bayou Corn. You are sure to come across these. Natural gas bubbles of all sizes along the waterway. This one right here is the biggest officials say they have seen.
We have reported on May 30th a pipeline leak which started us coming out and investigating a bubbling that's in Bayou Corn.
Assumption Parish Homeland Security Director John Boudreaux says since then, though, pipeline officials have not ruled that out just yet, but say it's unlikely. So now, investigators are going through the process of elimination. By coincidence, since the bubbling began, many in Assumption Parish are worried.
Our house shifting and cracks in our sheetrock and in our foundation.
My home moved, and my home shook. It moved, and I'm on cement.
Officials don't know yet whether the two are related. Boudreaux has taken samples of the bubbles and sent them off for testing.
Officials are monitoring the bubbles twice a day. As for now, no evacuations have been issued and the waterways remain open. In Assumption Parish, Karen Chawla, WAFB 9 News.
This sinkhole is swallowing up more of Bayou Corn. The sinkhole grew overnight.
Infrared equipment shows it's 10 to 20 feet wider. The sinkhole expanded to the north and south. A National Guard helicopter crew noticed the changes using special equipment. Some are worried about radiation in the area now. New at 6 o'clock, News 2's Adrian Pittman has more on that and what state experts say about it.
That fear comes after Texas brine was given the green light to fill its empty brine cavern with naturally occurring radioactive material years ago. Now that scientists believe that cavern maybe have collapsed, concerns swarm about what could leak out, so experts tested air samples and the mud in the sinkhole for radiation. Preliminary tests show at no point were there any detectable levels. The Department of Environmental Quality says now this is one less problem people living on Bayou Corn have to worry about. An additional water sample and soil samples were also taken today and sent to the lab for more detailed analysis, but those results should be back sometime next week. And a short time ago, the Department of Natural Resources ordered Texas brine to give daily reports on that cavern. Adrian Pittman, WBRZ, Balanced News.
Thank you, Adrian. Crews are also checking on bubbles in Bayou Corn connected to all of this. So far, there's been no change. The bubbles appeared weeks ago at the beginning of the summer. The sinkhole developed about a week ago.
New at 11 in Dauphin County, a sinkhole is closing the on-ramp to Route 283 west of Fulling Mill Road in Lower Swatara Township. It will stay closed until
Garage Field at Warwick High School remains closed today as contractors continue to work out their plan of action to fix the sinkhole that formed over the weekend. The sinkhole is at the 20-yard line towards the concession stand on the home side of Track A. Well, surveillance video showed that happened on Saturday after more than 4 inches fell last Friday. Well, the turf fabric was not damaged, but it is separated from the asphalt.
Information right now, a sinkhole has closed around a road in Yuba County.
This is happening on Hamilton-Smartville Road, just east of the Doolittle Drive gate to Beale Air Force Base.
Night Team's Mallory Hoff is there live at the scene. Mallory.
Well, in the last hour, as you can see here, crews have placed a board on top of the sinkhole. Let's get you straight to some video of what it looks like underneath. Now, this hole measures at 8 feet by 12 feet. It's 20 feet deep. The CHP says it opened up around 7
A massive sinkhole in southeastern New Mexico continues to swallow the earth around it and shows no signs of slowing down. News 13's Brian Roberts joins us live from Roswell with the latest.
The sinkhole started 2 days ago when Jim's Water Service of New Mexico reported they lost a brine water well after the ground it had stood on for 37 years collapsed. The massive hole 17 miles southeast of Artesia has closed down County Road 217 for miles because the ground is so unstable. Officials say a giant cavity nearly 400 feet underground caused the sinkhole. Right now they estimate it to be 150 feet across, but say it continues to grow. The Oil Conservation Division of New Mexico and the BLM are continuing to monitor the hole and are trying to keep the public as far away as possible.
This was once the shaft of the Jefferson Island salt mine, where men had been pulling salt out of the earth since 1919. Louisiana's salt lies in gigantic underground domes, some larger than Mount Everest, which are pushed upward by the force of the heavier rock that surrounds them. Part of the Jefferson Island mine is located directly under Lake Peigneur. The mine, which was operated by the Diamond Crystal Salt Company, shared space on Jefferson Island with a lush botanical preserve known as Live Oak Gardens. There's another abundant resource deep under Lake Peigneur, one frequently found in pockets near salt domes. It's as black as the salt is white. So it was hardly surprising that Texaco was conducting exploratory drilling close to the Jefferson Island salt mine in November of 1980. On November 20th, the two delicate underground and underwater operations, drilling oil and mining salt, collided in spectacular fashion.
At 500 or 600 feet, they hit salt. And they were not supposed to hit salt for another couple of 100 feet.
The drill bit became stuck. The crew heard strange popping sounds. The oil rig tilted badly to one side.
And at that point in time, the drillers recognized that they had a fairly serious problem on their hands.
What they didn't realize is the 14-inch drill bit had punctured the roof of the salt mine at the 1,300-foot level, creating a funnel for Lake Peigneur to drain into. It was apparently the result of a simple miscalculation. 90 minutes after the drill became stuck, the drilling crew, who had wisely abandoned the tilting rig, watched in amazement from the shore as their 150-foot derrick disappeared into a lake that was less than 10 feet deep. Meanwhile, 1,300 feet below the surface of Lake Peigneur, diamond crystal miners, who had not been alerted to a problem, looked up to see something you should never see in a salt mine. Water.
Water flowing through salt tends to dissolve the salt. As you increase the volume of water, you increase the volume of salt that can be dissolved.
Soon it was clear. Lake Peigneur was draining through the hole bored by the drill bit and into the salt mine. As the 2.5 billion gallons of Lake Peigneur surged into the mine with 10 times the pressure of a fire hydrant, a mighty whirlpool was forming on the surface.
The whirlpool is basically a vortex of water and mud that is flowing down into a fairly confined space. And that whirlpool is basically flowing downwards under the force of gravity, pulling sediment and other materials down with it.
The Whirlpool sucking force pulled heavy-duty barges toward it as their crews leapt for safety. Men watched with jaws agape as 11 barges and a tugboat disappeared into the vortex. Those are 4 fully loaded flatbed trucks spinning helplessly in the whirlpool. By that point, the whirlpool was sucking down Jefferson Island itself. Before evening, 65 acres of land, including much of Live Oak Gardens, would end up at the bottom of the mine. 150-year-old trees were snapped in half.
There were pecan trees that were 150 feet tall down here in this woods, and to stand there and watch them drop completely out of sight was, yeah.
Along the shoreline, along the Live Oak Gardens and the Jefferson Island Mansion, you're basically seeing what are called landslides, where the ground is actually shearing and breaking apart, and gravity's pulling these blocks down into the hole.
Look at this over here, look! Look at that. Wow. Look at this.
That house that we were standing on, all you see now is a chimney. The house sank about 30 feet.
Could things get worse? Yes. Delcom Canal, which normally flowed away from Lake Penior and into the Gulf of Mexico, actually reversed direction under the intense sucking power of the whirlpool. As the water rushed into the now nearly empty lake bed, it formed a 150-foot waterfall, the highest ever in Louisiana.
But that's the only time the Gulf of Mexico flowed north, basically. So that's a lot of water, to fill up that hole.
As the water rushed into the mine, its rapid displacement of the underground caverns shot a deafening blast of compressed air, and later, a 400-foot geyser up from the mine shaft.
To see something like this, it was terrible, really. I thought it was the end of the world.
Good evening. An entire community forced from their homes.
It's in Bayou Corn, and tonight experts have an idea of why the ground gave way. A salt dome failure is blamed for this half-acre-sized sinkhole in Assumption Parish. Mysterious natural gas bubbles and tremors are also blamed on a salt mine operation run by Texas-based Texas Brine. That mine is now inactive. So now this situation has been developing now for almost 2 months.
Tonight, people's worst fears came true. Let's get you up to speed. These bubbles were the first sign something was wrong. Then neighbors started reporting tremors. Monitors are up, keeping track of the bubbles and the earth shaking.
It hasn't been used since last year. Now there are hundreds of similar domes that are scattered across the area.
Right. The scientists have been monitoring the situation in Bayou Corn for about 2 months now, but we just found out a couple of hours ago they've been in contact with Texas Brine Company. That's the company that's monitoring this particular salt dome, because they believe that that salt dome might be the cause of those bubbles. Now we understand that the Department of Natural Resources is calling the Texas Brine salt dome, quote, the likely source of today's sinkhole, and says it was caused by the potential failure of a portion of an inactive salt mining cavern. Salt domes, as you said, they're naturally occurring, and they're all over the state. We found over 100 of them have already been mapped. However, today's events bring up memories of Lake Penior that was in Lafayette. It completely collapsed in the 1980s during a mine disaster that punctured a salt dome underneath the lake. Now, Texas Brine still has to go in and evaluate